What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WrestleRant, where every single week I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network as well as on the Global Wrestling Network. Today we're talking ECW Wrestlepalooza from 1998. So almost 30 years old is this pay-per-view. Has not aged well. Maybe these shows were good back in the day. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. A lot of these ECW shows that I watch here in the network are fucking terrible. This was no different. I'm sorry, this show sucked. There was not one great match. There was one maybe good match, but beyond that, out of like 6 or 7 matches on the card, that's not good. That's not good. A lot of the matches just kind of blend together, very much the same. And I know it was different than what WWE and even WCW were doing from, at that point in time. It was different from what they were doing. But still, a lot of this stuff is like hardcore, nonsensical wrestling. And I'm not saying it has to be a 5-star Mac classic, but if they were telling good stories and not going too over the top with this shit, then it would be a different story. But a lot of these matches were just awful. And how could I care about any story they're trying to tell if the matches aren't any good? Anyway, we kicked off the show with the BWO taking on the FBI. A decent opener, honestly one of the better matches on the entire show, which seems silly to say just because it really was not that good of a match. It was hardly memorable, but it was okay. Good match, went about 10 minutes. Nothing too wrong with it, nothing to write home about, granted, but it was okay. Beat the hell out of the next match, Mikey Whipwreck versus Just Incredible. This was just very slow, just about around the same time, almost 10 minutes long. There was too much interference from Jason and Chastity, two people that were on the side of Just Incredible. Too much bullshit going on here, not exciting at all. Just way too many dumb bumps that served no purpose, like broken tables and all this other stupid shit. There was no story told here. No real story told at all. It was just a bunch of dumbass bumps that were random as fuck, interference, and no real excitement at all. So this sucked. Credible won. For the ECW World Tag Team titles, it was the Chris Candido and Lance Storm taking the Hardcore Chair Swinging Freaks. This was not good either. Candido and Storm were a good tag team, but I don't know. This really just did not work all too well at all. Just because Candido and Storm, they weren't really getting along. We saw that on the last pay-per-view. I don't know what happened between the last pay-per-view and this one, because now they were suddenly on the same side. But they had two totally different styles to mesh here, and like a team that had some good wrestling ability, and then the Hardcore Chair Swinging Freaks that were just kind of fucking there to wreck shit up, and it didn't really work. The finish sucked, just kind of came out of nowhere, felt anticlimactic, and again, this was boring for almost 12 minutes long. Really was not exciting. A lot of things did not feel smooth, had zero chemistry, these two teams did. Candido and Storm, in the end, still the ECW Tag Team Champions, though. We had 2 segments after that. One with Joey Styles introducing a slew of legends from the area, including Dick Slater, Masked Superstar, Junkyard Dog, Bob Armstrong. So it was okay. Didn't really serve much of a purpose, but it was a cool little segment to honor the legends. Then we had Shane Douglas coming out, cutting another promo for God knows what fucking reason, because he was on the show later on in the night anyway. He had the ECW World title. So he was Taz wanted him to give up the belt. He didn't, and then Taz choked him out. So, I mean, it was a decent segment, but Shane Douglas going on for fucking 10 minutes about God knows what is not my definition of most must-see television. Bam Bam Bigelow took on New Jack. Oh my God, this was awful. Anything involving New Jack is pretty much terrible. This was no exception. I fucking hate whenever New Jack comes out, or whoever, whatever the fucking tag team that he was a part of, every single time he came out, the song would play. Not his song, because obviously they couldn't play that stuff on the network, but some dumbass song that just keeps looping over and over and over until the match is done. For like 10 minutes you hear this shit, and it's so bad, and the match isn't any good anyway. This did not need to happen at all. Bigelow beat New Jack there. The Dudley Boys took on Tommy Dreamer and the Sandman. This should have been a lot better than what it was. I mean, the Sandman sucks in the ring, but the Dudley Boys were good. Tommy Dreamer's very good, obviously. Just for whatever reason, this was one giant mess. The rest of the Dudley Boys that weren't even in the match were interfering. Just a lot of fucking shenanigans and stupid-ass stuff that didn't serve any purpose. And not a good match at all. Dreamer and Sandman won there. For the ECW World Television Championship, It was Sabu taking on the defending champion Rob Van Dam, who was really killing it in ECW above anyone else in that promotion. I'm sorry, but Rob Van Dam was the soul-saving grace of a lot of these shows and just ECW in general back in the day. This was a great match. They got 30 minutes here, went to a time limit draw. I mean, granted, there wasn't really much of a story told, but still, I thought, for what it was pretty much a spot fest. But it was a fun match. Again, better than anything else on this card. That's for fucking sure. Very well wrestled. They worked very well together. Could have benefited from a better story, but that notwithstanding, considering the trash this match was up against on this show, it really shined out as fucking Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker from WrestleMania 25. It might as well have been Taker and Michaels from Mania 25. That's how good this match was compared to all the other shit on the show. Then we get to the terrible main event for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. Shane Douglas taking on Al Snow. Douglas was the defending world champion. This was terrible. 13 minutes, and not a single moment of this I enjoyed. Just went on and on and on. Again, more interference that dragged it down from Candido and then Francine. All this dumbass shit. So then Douglas wins after reversing something from Snow into a sunset flip. And that's how he wins the match. The crowd shit all over it, not just to give the guy heat, but just because it sucked. Because it was a terrible ending. And to no one's surprise, Al Snow, I believe, if the story is correct, this was his last match in ECW, went on to return to WWE like the next night. Went back to WWE the very next night on Raw. Or soon after, anyway. Thank God this was his final farewell from ECW, just because he had a great gimmick. The head stuff was over, obviously. And, I mean, again, he did a lot of good work in ECW that would eventually get him rehired by WWE. But this match was terrible. The last match in the main event of the last show with Storm and Snow, Al Snow and Lance Storm versus Shane Douglas and Chris Candido, that sucked too. But yeah, this really was not any good at all. Really closed out one of the worst pay-per-views I've seen in some time. And there's been a lot of bad ECW pay-per-views I've talked about and reviewed here on the channel. This might be the worst of them all. Because even RVD and Sabu isn't great. It is great compared to everything else on the show. But as a standalone match, it's not even that great. Really, nothing on this show is all that good whatsoever, which is a terrible, terrible thing to have when you have a near 3-hour pay-per-view and almost nothing stands out in a good way. That's not good. So, strong 2 thumbs down here from yours truly. I would not recommend you watch this show at all, unless you like to watch bad pay-per-views and make fun of them like, look how bad this is. Other than that, this was fucking atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. Most of these ECW pay-per-views are, but this was easily one of the worst ones I've seen up to this point. I've seen so far. This really was not any good in the slightest. And that was ECW Wrestlepalooza 1998. Thank you guys for checking out my review of the show. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. We will be back next Tuesday, I believe, with a new Impact review, a TNA pay-per-view review. I think it's Slammiversary, if I'm not mistaken. Slammiversary 2005. So I believe we're talking about that next week right here on the show. Until then, guys, have a great rest of your week. I'm going to SmackDown tonight. Cannot wait for that in Brooklyn. Should be amazing. And I'll catch your ass down the road.